It has a mistake in it. Those were the words spoken on the floor of the House of Representatives today at 11:10 a.m. that shocked every Republican member of the House of Representatives. They all know that the real leading expert on House rules is Democrat Jim McGovern, the Democratic leader of the House Rules Committee. They know that the Republican chair of the House Rules Committee, Virginia Foxx, is completely and permanently incompetent, always has been, always will be, as is her staff. And so the way in over his head Republican Speaker of the House Mike Johnson learned from Democrat Jim McGovern on the floor today at 11:10 a.m. that what Speaker Johnson brought to the floor of the House to vote on had a mistake in it. Unlike the Senate, the House of Representatives they have a vote that creates a rule for each piece of legislation that passes through the House of Representatives, and it's a different rule for each one. They all have very similar elements. In the Senate, there are the standing rules of the Senate. They're written down, and they don't change. But the House Rules Committee, controlled by the party in power, literally writes a rule that is the guideline for how that particular bill will be handled on the floor of the House of Representatives. And that rule always says, for example, that there will be no amendments allowed on the House floor. That's why you only see amendments on the Senate floor, never on the House floor. But the incompetent Republicans did such a bad job of writing that very simple one-paragraph rule that Jim McGovern stopped everything in the House of Representatives today by announcing to the House, it has a mistake in it. We've never seen anything like that in the House of Representatives, nothing that stupid in the House of Representatives. And for the next 11 hours, the Republican House of Representatives was paralyzed by that Republican mistake. Usually in the House of Representatives, no one in the Republican Party ever listens to anything anyone in the Democratic Party says on the House floor. But this time, the whole House heard what Congressman Jim McGovern said when he started a drama like we have never seen before in the House of Representatives with these words.
I want to alert all members to something about this rule. It has a mistake in it. Republicans have rushed this process from the very beginning to meet Trump's artificial July 4th deadline, and this rule is no exception. We found an error in the rule at 2 a.m. this morning after the Rules Committee reported the rule.
By reported the rule, Jim McGovern means after the Republicans on the Rules Committee voted for the rule and sent the rule to the floor of the House for a vote by the House. And here is the mistake.
This is going to sound a little in the weeds, but they forgot to do something called considering the previous question as ordered on their big, ugly bill. Now, let me put that in English. What that means is they won't have an escape hatch once they start debate on this bill. So if they started and they realize they don't have the votes, they still have to take the embarrassing vote.
And that was shocking news to the dazed and confused Speaker, Mike Johnson, who will never know half as much as Jim McGovern knows about how the House of Representatives actually works. And when Jim McGovern said that, we now know the Republicans did not have the votes. Mike Johnson didn't have the votes to pass his rule or his bill. Donald Trump didn't have the votes in the House of Representatives to pass his bill. And so there was panic in the Republican House and in the Trump White House.
Now, I expect they'll try to fix this with an amendment, but I have a question for members. If this Republican leadership cannot get a one-paragraph rule right, can we really trust them to get a 870-page bill right? Not only are we going to find things that were snuck into this bill, we're going to find massive mistakes that have unintended consequences for people and industries across this country. This whole process has been lousy, and this rule is no exception.
And then, using the opening that Jim McGovern identified for the House one by one, the Democrats used their right to go to the microphone and ask for an amendment to protect Medicaid and the Nutrition Assistance Program. And the Republicans blocked every single attempt on the House floor today to save Medicaid and save the nutrition assistance program that feeds poor children and poor families everywhere in this country, in every one of those House members' districts. And then Jim McGovern said this.
Mr. Speaker, over 100 Democratic members just asked to allow an amendment to protect Medicaid and SNAP, just to give us a vote. That's all we ask. And I will say we are here standing up for the American people no matter where they live. And this is what it looks like to fight for the American people, to make sure that this administration and this Republican Congress doesn't rip away their health care and their food benefits. That is disgusting. In the gentlewoman from North Carolina's district alone, 142,000 of her constituents would lose some or all of their SNAP benefits. And 5 rural hospitals are at risk of closure. We're here to help people, not to screw them over.
New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said this.
President Trump had issued some statements throughout this process saying and urging, insisting that this bill does not cut Medicaid. He's also said some things, he says he doesn't think I'm too much of a smart person. And I'll tell you one thing. It doesn't take a smart person to know if you're being lied to. All right. President Trump, you're either being lied to or you are lying to the American people. Because this bill represents, in the text of this bill, the largest and greatest loss of health care in American history. 17 million Americans will lose their health care on this bill, not undocumented people, not quote unquote the disgusting term illegal, but 17 million Americans will have their health care cut from this bill. On this point of tax on tips, as one of the only people in this body who has lived off of tips, I want to tell you a little bit about the scam of that text, a little bit of the fine print there. The cap on that is $25,000. While you're jacking up taxes on people who make less than $50,000 across the United States, while taking away their SNAP, while taking away their Medicaid, while kicking them off of the ACA and their health care extensions. So if you're at home and you're living off tips, you do the math. Is that worth it to you? Losing all your health care, not able to feed your babies, not being able to put a diaper on their bottom in exchange for what? This bill is a deal with the devil. It explodes our national debt. It militarizes our entire economy, and it strips away health care and basic dignity of the American people. For what? To give Elon Musk a tax break and billionaires the greedy taking of our nation. We cannot stand for it, and we will not support it. You should be ashamed.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, who will join us later in this hour, came up with a new frame on the Republican bill.
I found the preamble to this big, ugly bill. We, the billionaires, and our king, in order to deform and sicken our union, establish injustice, ensure domestic servility, weaken our people's defenses, undermine the general welfare, and reserve to ourselves and our posterity staggering debt servitude for eternity, do hereby instruct the Republicans in Congress to strip 17 million people of their health care, increase co-pays, deductibles, and premiums for everyone else, cut 42 million people off of nutritional assistance, increase the national debt by $4 trillion, trash renewable energy systems, increase our electric bills for the carbon kings, all to weaken and destroy the Constitution of the people of these United States of America. Please include this preamble in the legislative record.
Donald Trump met with 13 individual members of the House of Representatives today who were seen entering the White House. The New York Times describes the scene this way. A conga line of angsty Republican lawmakers filed through the West Wing on Wednesday, hemming and hawing about the big domestic policy bill that President Trump wants them to pass by Friday. They walked out with signed merchandise, photos in the Oval Office, and, by some accounts, a newfound appreciation for the bill. Targets all of a blunt force charm offensive waged with precision by the president. Mr. Trump knows how to make lowly lawmakers feel special. He sends them handwritten attaboys. He takes their phone calls at all hours of the day, even interrupting high-level West Wing meetings, so as not to miss them. He brings them to Ultimate Fighting Championship fights and sits them ringside with his entourage. He invites them into the social whirl at Mar-a-Lago, all of which can feel incredibly heady for small-time members of Congress. I think the times might mean small-minded members of Congress. One of the Republicans who has been objecting to the Medicaid cuts from the start insisted today, after completely giving up all of his objections to the bill, quote, "We're not a bunch of little bitches." Okay, no one said you were. I mean, we've said negative things about what you're voting for and what you're willing to do. And many of us have said negative things about the cruelty that you're willing to inflict on people here and around the world. But little bitches is your term, Congressman Derek Van Orden, not mine. Here is the full context of Derek Van Orden's breathtakingly pathetic little bitches self-defense. The President of the United States didn't give us an assignment. We're not a bunch of little bitches around here, okay? I'm a member of Congress. I represent almost 800,000 Wisconsinites. Okay, but every member of the House of Representatives represents approximately the same number of people. That's the idea of proportional representation, and it always has been. Congressman Van Orden does represent exactly one billionaire. Exactly one of those 800,000 people residing in his Wisconsin district is a billionaire. And that is the one person who has absolutely nothing to complain about in this legislation, because Republicans have taken care of billionaires in this legislation as if they are an endangered species. In the United States Senate, Democrats offered an amendment to the bill that would have made the income tax on incomes only over $10 million exactly what that income tax was under President Clinton and under President Obama, 39.6%, 2.5% higher than it will be under the Trump tax cuts. Donald Trump's going to give them a tax rate of 37%. And the Democrats said, how about 2.5% higher just for incomes over $10 million? The Democrats gave the Republicans in the Senate an opportunity to preserve every single tax cut in the bill in one vote, except for incomes over $10 million. The Democratic amendment would have restored the income tax on income over $10 million to 39.6%, which is exactly what it was for every year of the Clinton presidency, when those billionaires were on their way to becoming billionaires, because the economy was booming every single year of the Clinton presidency, and they were getting richer and richer every single day of the Clinton presidency with a 39.6 income tax rate on their income. Even though in those days, in the 1990s, they paid 2.5% more income tax than they will under Donald Trump. And Republicans in the Senate fought that amendment in the Senate. And they sent that bill back to the House of Representatives with that full guaranteed protection for every single dollar of income over $10 million. There is no amount of money you can possibly earn that should ever be taxed above 37% under any possible scenario, according to Republicans. Should never, ever be taxed the way income was taxed during the economic boom years under President Clinton and President Obama. Republican taxation religion says no, never. It can never be above 37. It can never be 39.6, even for $100 million or $1 billion. Can't do it. And so the Republicans in the United States Senate cast a vote specifically to protect the highest level incomes this country has ever seen, the incomes of billionaires and the incomes of people who make more than $10 million a year. And not one Republican had any doubt about that. Congressman Derek Van Orden of Wisconsin, who represents exactly that one billionaire, gave that billionaire everything he could possibly give him in his representation of that billionaire, while he gave absolutely nothing to the 152,900 people in his district on Medicaid. He gave them nothing. And I don't know what you call members of Congress who do that. But Congressman Van Orden, if your term for that is little bitches, okay. But don't be surprised if your constituents call you something much worse than that. The Democrats today named names. They identified the names of some of the Republican House members who they believe they can defeat and remove from the House of Representatives in the next congressional election because of those Republicans' support for billionaires and their willingness to snatch health care away from 17 million people. And not one Democrat called any of those Republicans little bitches.
Why would anyone vote for this dangerous and extreme bill? Why would Rob Bresnahan vote for this bill? More than 30,000 people would lose access to their health care in his community in Pennsylvania. Almost 60,000 households could lose access to food assistance in his community, at risk of going hungry. Why would Rob Bresnahan vote for this bill? Why would Scott Perry vote for this bill? Almost 25,000 people in his community will lose access to health care. In his community, in Pennsylvania, almost 40,000 households would lose access to nutritional assistance. They're at risk of going hungry. Why would Scott Perry vote for this bill?